The International Business Times uncovered another Goldman Sachs scheme to rob the American people blind. It says how Gary Cohn could sell U.S. infrastructure to Goldman Sachs. So an infrastructure deal or bill could be a total ruse. They say President Donald Trump's administration this week touted an infrastructure plan that would sell off public assets to private financial firms. Left unsaid in the White House promotional materials was any mention that the Trump aide, who is overseeing the initiative, comes from a Wall Street firm that says it is seeking to buy up the very same kind of assets the Trump administration plans to sell off. Leading the White House privatization initiative is Gary Cohn, the former president of Goldman Sachs, who received a $285 million payout upon leaving the bank and taking a job as the director of Trump's National Economic Council. As Cohn has led the infrastructure privatization initiative from that perch, Goldman Sachs declared that it continues to look at new business initiatives that revolve around taking ownership of public assets, according to Securities and Exchange Commission documents reviewed by International Business Times. The 6-page initiative rolled out by the Trump administration earlier this week detailed plans to spend $200 billion to incentivize additional non-federal funding and reward private investors for buying and maintaining government-owned infrastructure properties like bridges, airports, and toll highways. Those initiatives echo plans laid out by Goldman Sachs in its SEC filings dating back to at least 2008 in a section of its most recent annual SEC filings about the company's recent and planned business initiatives. The bank details its ongoing public infrastructure investments. Okay, so understand what's going on here. They're trying to enrich themselves at your expense. So this so-called infrastructure deal that Trump wants to do is basically to make our infrastructure no longer infrastructure. He wants to turn it into private investments. So people privately own what was our infrastructure. Well, that's no longer infrastructure. Infrastructure, you'd be talking about government, publicly owned, fill in the blank, roads, bridges, waterways, airports, all that stuff. They say, no, let's take that and give it to our buddies in the finance industry. And then what are they going to do? Here's how they're going to sell it. They're going to say, well, no, what do you mean? We're going to save money. Taxpayers are going to save money. And everything's going to look nicer because we're upgrading it. That's the argument they're going to make. In reality, what's going to happen? Again, it's just a ruse for Goldman Sachs and other financial institutions to make profit off of public utilities, to make profit off of the commons. What's supposed to be, hey, that's all of ours. You look at national parks, we all own that. Roads, we all own it. They say, no, let's have them privately own it. Sell it off to them. And then what happens, by the way? In the long run, they're just going to jack up the prices for everything. Because now it's privately owned. What the fuck is to stop them? And they have a monopoly also. You have a bridge and you have a toll at the other end of the bridge. What's to stop now newly owned Goldman Sachs bridge for them to say, oh, I know that the toll was $5, but that was back when it was the government's bridge. Now we're making it $20. What are you going to do? You have to go over that bridge. It's the only option. And so now we're going to charge you $20. And by the way, there's also a little bit of a misnomer in here because this is just like private prisons. They say, well, private prisons, it's owned privately, so they can turn a profit. They can make money off of it. But there's a misconception that people think, well, if it's private, that means there's no government money going to it, right? That's incorrect. Because what they do is they privatize the profits, and they still take taxpayer money. So there used to be no profit margin. Then when you privatize it, there becomes a profit margin, and they still take taxpayer money. So it's government funded, but they go, no, it's private, though. So again, it's just a ruse for them to make money off of it. It will be the same thing here. Goldman Sachs, I just told you, $200 billion to incentivize additional non-federal spending. So that's the government giving Goldman Sachs and financial institutions, hey, here's $200 billion for infrastructure. They go, thank you very much. And then they also make money on top of that. So they take money from the taxpayers, do the job for probably pennies on the dollar, And then they turn around and they'll jack up the prices of the tolls and everything else. Look, there are some things that just shouldn't be private. Like some things, sure, no problem. Consumer goods, no problem having that private. You don't want the government making your video games or your couch or your bed or things of that nature. But when it comes to roads and bridges, and when it comes to airports, when it comes to the military, when it comes to prisons, you can't have the profit motive as part of that. Could you imagine if every road was privatized? Every time you made a turn on a new street, there'd be a toll to pay. But that's what they're effectively trying to do here. Trump's saying, yeah, we're going to do an infrastructure bill, and that infrastructure bill is making public infrastructure no longer infrastructure, turning it over to Goldman Sachs, and then of course Goldman Sachs is going to rip you off. Their whole existence is to rip you off. Don't take my word for it. Look at their fucking record. Look at what they did right before the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession. What they do is sell to unsuspecting clients subprime mortgage packages, and they were rated AAA, by the way. So they bought the ratings agencies to give them the good ratings. And they'd say, you're going to make a lot of money, buy these packages. These poor clients would buy these packages, and Goldman Sachs would turn around and bet on those same packages to fail. So they make money two ways, through fraud and gaming these clients, doing a scam on the clients, and then turning around and betting on the same products to fail. So they have nobody's interest in heart but their own. That should be clear at this point. They're a criminal organization. And Trump wants to take our infrastructure and sell it off to a criminal organization so that they can turn around and say, oh, we did an infrastructure deal, and see, everything looks a little bit upgraded. But look at the long-term consequences of it. The long-term consequences, we don't even have public infrastructure anymore. You're selling off giant swaths of our infrastructure to fucking Goldman Sachs. And again, in the long run, they'll let it all go to shit and still collect the money, because why not? Why not? You own it. You now have a monopoly on this infrastructure, on this road, on that bridge, and whatever the case is. So it's a trick. What's happening is a trick. And another thing they're going to do is they'll turn around and they'll say, well, what do you mean? We're being bipartisan here. You're not going to get an infrastructure bill from any other Republican. We're reaching across the aisle. Infrastructure is a Democratic priority. So, Democrats, what are you doing? Why can't you come to an agreement on this deal? Hello? We're doing your ideas. You say you like infrastructure. Republicans never talk about infrastructure. Well, here's Donald Trump, a Republican who's reaching across the aisle, and he's being so reasonable, and he's saying, let's do infrastructure. So, I don't know how the Democrats can't be on board with this. This is us doing their priorities. Yeah, but you're privatizing the infrastructure and turning it over to Goldman Sachs. That's like a worst-case scenario. That's like the one kind of infrastructure bill or deal where the Democrats should run fucking in the other direction 100 miles an hour. So this is, fuck, man, it's a ruse, it's a scam. And this is what happens when Donald Trump, remember when he campaigned, there was a lot of rhetoric against Wall Street, a lot of rhetoric against Goldman Sachs specifically. He said it when he was against Ted Cruz in the primary. He said it against Hillary Clinton in the general. And then he did a 180 when he got in office. Now he has at least 4 Goldman Sachs officials in top administration positions. Gary Cohn and Steve Mnuchin wrote his fucking tax plan and proposed his tax plan. They're the ones who did the announcement. They're the ones who had the press conference. Hey, let me explain to you what's in this tax plan. Goldman Sachs guys, when he was railing against Goldman Sachs. So he's the world's biggest hypocrite. But now the fox is guarding the fucking hen house. What do you expect? These guys who are in Goldman Sachs are crafting these bills, so everything at the end of the day is going to enrich Goldman Sachs and screw you over. Gary Cohn, they said it, $285 million payout when he left Goldman Sachs. An exit bonus, just like Dick Cheney with Halliburton. Hey, here, take a couple $100 million as you leave Halliburton. And oh, look at that, Halliburton happened to get no big contracts when the U.S. went to Iraq. Remember that? Well, it's the same thing. $285 million to Gary Cohn for an exit bonus. And by the way, that's not even all of it. More gets paid out over time. I think the number's like $800 billion or some preposterous number. We covered the story a while ago. $800 million, I should say. But what do you think's going to happen? Oh, he's going to take $285 million up front and hundreds of millions more later, and he's going to be principled about what's best for the infrastructure in the United States? No, he's going to try to rig everything in favor of Goldman Sachs and against you, the American people. This is fucking highway robbery. This is class warfare waged by the rich and Goldman Sachs on regular people. Middle-income people, low-income people, tax-paying Americans. They're going to jack your tax money and give it to Goldman Sachs while they upgrade a little bit of the infrastructure and then also jack up your tolls and find other ways of robbing you blind. That's what's going on here, and everybody needs to understand that.